Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses. I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today I am going to talk about parentified children. Now, my most recent subscriber episode is about people-pleasing parentified daughters of covertly narcissistic mothers. So if that specifically speaks to you or probably describes your wife because your mother-in-law is impossible, then you should obviously subscribe. You'll hear that one as well as around 200 extra episodes that you don't have access to if you don't subscribe. Okay, so a parentified child means a child who has to act like the parent to the parent. So the child, instead of their needs coming first, they learn that the parent's needs come first, whether these are physical or emotional. So, for example, and I'll talk about boys more in this episode because I talk about girls more in the other episode, the subscriber episode. So there are a lot of boys who become like the surrogate spouse to their mom, because the dad is working a lot, or he's an alcoholic, or he's just an asshole, which I'm sure shit went bad for him as a child. So, you know, no judgment, but he is not a good dad or husband, or he's emotionally absent, or he's on the spectrum, or he's, you know, has a girlfriend, he's unfaithful, he's not around a lot. I've heard all these things, you know, over the years and more. And the woman is very upset. And who does she turn to emotionally? She turns to her perfect little boy because he's so sweet and he's such a good listener and he loves her so much. And he gives her all of the love that she doesn't get from her husband. Is this conscious? Certainly not, but he learns that he basically has to take care of his mother's emotional needs. A version of the parentified child is the surrogate spouse. They're not exactly interchangeable because there are some people who do not have that emotional bond. They have to take care of, for example, an alcoholic parent is just laying there, and so they have to clean the house, they have to make the food, they have to bring over tea or coffee to the parent, etc. But there's not like an emotional component. The surrogate spouse is more of like an emotional role. It can also be physical, usually not sexual. That's beyond the scope of this episode if there's sexual abuse. But a surrogate spouse, it's also called emotional incest, you know, is another term. And what it means is like it's too close. There's no boundaries that there are usually between a parent and a child. Instead, it's overly close in a way that is more like a romantic relationship. So the mother will, for example, cry to her son, say, oh my God, my life is so terrible, etc. And his role is to say, no, it's going to be okay. Everybody doesn't understand you, you know, and to ally, of course, with whoever she doesn't like, and which often means his own dad, right? And so that puts him into a very bad emotional spot. Because in order to be there for her, and he feels very bad for her, and he sees how much she needs him, he has to repudiate his father, who may be an asshole truly, or have substance abuse issues, or gambling, or addiction, or whatever, but that's his father. and the guy isn't all bad because no human is all bad. And he's not really allowed to be close to the father because that would be seen as a betrayal of the mother. And that's why this is so pernicious as well, is because if you have a surrogate spouse, then you don't have space for other people. So he's a child, this boy or adolescent boy or child boy, whatever. And again, of course, this can be the girl as well, but I just delved into that in the most recent episode. That's the subscriber episode. And so he doesn't really also have space for his own father. He doesn't have space to have friends, really, because if he does bring them over, then, mommy could cry, or like dad is not around, like whatever. Usually it doesn't bring people around. And also the mother gets jealous of his time spent with other people. And also he can't really have a girlfriend, or a boyfriend or whatever he wants to have, because that spot is taken by the mother. And this can also happen with the father, and frequently does in the inverse, where the girl turns into daddy's little girl and the dad is very disappointed with the mother. And so he is the one who is filling that hole inside himself with the daughter, who's so beautiful and so sweet and so understanding, and whatever the mother isn't. Or maybe he thinks the mother is beautiful, but the mother won't touch him, won't look at him. So there is a way in which he's drawn to that, sweet daughter, and how much she loves him and how much she puts him on a pedestal. Now, this happens even in healthy families, by the way, of course, for the mother to have a soft spot for the son, or the father to have a soft spot for the daughter. This is pretty common. But when it turns into that the child feels bad hanging out with other people because what about the parent? Or when the child feels like they have only a certain way that they can act that's okay, otherwise the parent will be like so upset that they're inconsolable, or angry, then this turns into something worse. And then the child becomes truly parentified, and they are an adult. They have adult level burdens and responsibilities within that parent-child relationship. Now, what happens when this child grows up is they're very, very uncomfortable with vulnerability and with intimacy, because they never experienced unconditional love. The love that they experienced was contingent love based on being a good boy/girl and growing into this role of an adult or a surrogate spouse before they were developmentally ready. So they were put in an unfair situation, so they had to develop a false self, a false persona of an adult. And they often identify it with it a lot, and they don't think it's fake. So they'll say, oh yeah, but mommy just, my mom just confided in me because I'm an old soul. Everybody said I was an old soul. An old soul just means like a kid that's a parentified child that's been like expected to act like an adult and is rewarded by the family for acting like an adult. They're reinforced whenever they act like a mini adult instead of like a child. They're told how mature they are and how smart they are and how precocious they are, and they're an old soul and an empath and all this shit that is not malevolent. It's just the parent. It's very convenient. It reduces cognitive dissonance in the parent to be confiding in a child that is not a real child. It's much easier if it's some sort of demi-adult. So this is a very useful lens through which to view the child. And then, of course, the child takes that on. But then when they come into adulthood, they have to find that same role. That's like the only role that they're good at, is taking care of somebody emotionally and physically. They are not good at receiving care. So they're not good at being vulnerable and asking for help. They're not good at, for example, saying that they can't do something, because they could never say that as a kid, that they couldn't do something, because the parent already couldn't do like anything. They were so fragile. So the child had to not add to their burden. They couldn't put anything else on the plate of this parent that was struggling so much, whether it was depression, anxiety, addiction, a difficult marriage, as I've said, all of these things. So when they're older, within intimate relationships, they're drawn to people that need caretaking, and they yearn to be taken care of in some kind of way that they can't even verbalize. For men, this is often verbalized only as sex. That's the only way that they'll let a woman take care of them, is in bed. But as I talk about all the time, if the only thing that you ever need from your wife is sex, she starts to feel like a prostitute. And that's my stuff where I write posts and podcasts on when you try to take everything off your wife's plate, but she's still not happy. Because the guy who's the parentified child often does this. He says, okay, well, I'm good at doing literally everything. I've learned that from childhood. What I'm not good at is being vulnerable, but I can do that in bed. And none of this is obviously verbalized or even known. This is subconscious stuff. So he thinks, wouldn't it be great if we both, the way that the division of labor here worked is I take care of literally everything, which I've known how to do since I was 7, and she just takes care of having sex with me. And then, of course, not only is this man attracted to a childlike, fragile partner that reminds him of the parent that he had to be to take care of, but also he amplifies that person's tendency toward being childlike by this very thing, taking everything off their plate so that the limited amount of being an adult that they could do is no longer even there after a few years with this person who takes everything else off their plate that they were even doing in the first place. So like maybe the woman could do some laundry when he met her, but now he took even that away, though he barely knows how to work a machine anymore. And the only thing he wants her to do is to have sex with him. And then she feels like, I just watched Pretty Baby. She feels like one of those women in the brothel, that like doesn't do anything. I mean, for real, this is how women feel. Literally, all he wants me for is sex. And this is because that's all that he can be vulnerable asking for. And it's the same thing for women who overfunction, because this is called overfunctioning. That's what happens to the parentified child is they become an overfunctioner in adulthood. Is she takes care of everything in the whole world, but then she feels like a martyr and she feels like, why don't men ever take care of me? Well, because you're not drawn to men who would take care of you because you wouldn't know what the hell to do with such a man because since childhood, you've been taking care of everybody else. And so in couples therapy or individual therapy, people are made aware of these patterns, and they decide that they want to explore once they know the origin of this, and that's been explicated, and we've delved into the family of origin stuff, which if you don't do that in therapy, what are you in therapy for? You're not going to understand anything better when you left than when you came. So when you pick a therapist, look for somebody who says that they are a little bit deeper than just doing straight up CBT, because even if you just think that you're struggling with depression, if you're the kind of person who would listen to this podcast, then you want to go deeper than just, thought stopping. But anywho, so we learn how to experiment with different kinds of dynamics such that a man can finally verbalize what he needs from his wife that isn't just sex. And somebody who has always been in a caretaker role can experiment with being somebody who's taken care of, which is transformative for a dynamic that has been so previously imbalanced. And by the way, if you are still in touch with the parent is still alive, there are many issues there as well that often need to be worked out, because the parent that you were taking care of all those years is often very jealous, whether or not they're cognizant of that you have another family. And a lot of these parents have personality disorder traits or full diagnoses of narcissism or borderline personality, and they can't deal with it. They're so scared that you'll abandon them and that you won't prioritize them that they tend to sabotage their relationship with you and your family. And the only time that they will give you the full extent of their love is when it's just you and them. And so they want you to prioritize just them over your family, and that's not going to work. So then often, in therapy, we talk about how to change this dynamic with the parent. Like how do you set boundaries with a parent after you were always trained to have no boundaries at all and to prioritize taking care of them over taking care of yourself. And I have posts and stuff about this, how to deal with parents and in-laws who don't respect you is one of them on drpsychmom.com. And this can also be very useful, by the way, in couples therapy for both people in the couple to walk through how did this develop? Like, why is my mother this way, like your wife is saying, why can't you set boundaries with your mom? Why can't you set boundaries with your mom? And you're trying to be like, well, here's the thing. Like, I don't know how to do that because I'm the only one. My mother said I'm the only one that's ever loved her, the only one that cares about her. How could I do it? It's going to break her heart. She's going to throw herself out the window, And the woman ends up thinking the man is weak and the mother-in-law is just a huge bitch. But the reality is that when she walks through the whole dynamic, she could finally feel empathy for how this whole catastrophe started, Picture her husband as a little boy. Think about why did this happen to the woman? What was the larger context of the mother-in-law's life? I mean, it could really be transformative in promoting empathy and allowing then boundaries to be set by the couple, which is always better than just the person by themselves. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned some about people pleasers. And, people pleasing is also something that you do, as you'll hear if you go back to my other subscriber episode. But parentified children, who do, of course, become overfunctioners and people pleasers for the reasons that I've described, and their relationships in adulthood and how those are impacted by this early being a surrogate spouse / being a parentified child. And you can also always listen to all my stuff on adult children of dysfunctional families. Put that term into the search bar on drpsychmom.com if you want to read articles about that. This is the main work of individual therapy. When people come in and they want to figure out their life, they're like, why do I keep getting into relationships where I don't get my needs met? Usually that's because you didn't get your needs met as a kid because there was not an unconditionally loving parent. As much as they tried, they couldn't. They had their own issues, and their issues, unfortunately and sadly, precluded them being a healthy parent and thus trained you into adulthood before your time, which is the origin of almost everybody who's an overfunctioner. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.